Well, Donald just gave a half-hour speech that was full of falsehoods, outright lies, and ridiculous promises. That's consistent with his entire career of how he does things. He said China controls the Panama Canal. It doesn't. He described the American economy as being in collapse, essentially. We had 16 million jobs added in the last 4 years. Under Trump, we lost jobs, the first time that had happened in almost a century. The US economy is the strongest in the world. Donald just ignores facts. I would argue that we are now living in the Trump imaginary universe, where the made up things in his head are now going to become public policy in the United States. And this will be a great problem, not only for Americans, but people around the world, because Donald lives in this world where he creates his own reality and facts do not matter.
Donald Trump made vows and promises to bring America strong again. And definitely we've seen an era before Trump that was seriously in deep crisis. And we've seen the inflation rates, we've seen the crises that hit the United States, we've seen the whole world in tragedies. Now, Trump's inauguration speech highlighted determination to lower, for instance, the energy costs and to control inflation rates. Increase the domestic production, for an instant. Now, how do you see these goals aligning with his broader vision for energy dominance, for an instant, and the economic reforms at large?
Well, the United States is the world's largest energy producer. Every time Saudi Arabia, the second producer, produces 5 barrels of oil, the U.S. Produces 6. We are awash with oil and natural gas in this country. And so why we would need to have a massive effort to drill, baby, drill, as he said, is a bit of a mystery, because we have so much oil in the U.S. that we're exporting it.
You've often emphasized Trump's unconventional approach to leadership, with focus on regulatory rollbacks such as ending Biden-era renewable energy policies. Now, how might this impact the economy and the energy sector in the near term?
Well, Donald is clearly opposed to renewable sources of energy, wind and solar. Those are the cheapest sources of electricity now. Even when you discount the subsidies that are being temporarily provided, it's still the cheapest electricity. And America has a demanding need for electricity because of the digital economy that we live in. So removing benefits connected with solar and wind will tend to raise prices, completely contrary to Trump's position about what he says he's going to do. And it's indicative of the fact that Donald is just appallingly ignorant about the world. He simply doesn't know things. He claims to be the world's greatest expert on 22 subjects. No one, of course, could be the greatest expert on 22 subjects.
But if I may ask you here, sir, no one definitely knows or can be the expert of everything on the world. But here, for instance, in one of your books, The Big Cheat, you discuss Trump's ability to capitalize on opportunities during his presidency, and this, what we've seen in 2016, for instance, during his first term. Now, in this term, do you think his cautious approach to tariffs this time reflects a shift in strategy, or is it a calculated move to stabilize global trade relations?
Donald has this belief that if you impose a tariff, it's paid by the country whose goods are affected. That's not how tariffs work. A tariff is an increase in prices to domestic customers, to Americans. And it also enables domestic manufacturers to raise their prices to just below the price of the tariffed good, whether it comes from Egypt or China or anywhere else. So Donald doesn't understand that. He announced there's going to be a Bureau of External Revenue, and he said repeatedly, we're going to make China pay our taxes. That's simply not how it works. That's part of this fictional or imaginary universe that Donald lives in. It has nothing to do with economic reality.
Right, but let me here ask you, this is why I'm asking you, that was, when we're speaking about new strategy, after all what we've seen in 4 years, and definitely the 4 years, the 4 back years were not the maximum or the best ever economic situation the United States has been facing. Now, from your point of view, what could be his upcoming strategy, since he vowed for a better America and prosperity? From your point of view, what do you think he can? What priorities would he have?
Well,
let
first,
me here ask you about the inflation rates, for an instant.
Let me be clear. The U.S. economy grew much more under Joe Biden than under Donald Trump's first term. Inflation is now below the average since World War II. Inflation basically has been licked in the U.S. It's down below the post-World War II average.
But that was also because of the monetary policy in which the Fed reserves has interfered several times, right?
Well, the Fed is an independent organization, not subject to control by the president
Definitely.
or Congress, set up for that reason. And it is also the Biden policies that have helped bring down inflation. But Donald is doing two things with his tariffs. He's trying to argue that other countries, notably China, have been ripping off the United States. And secondly, he's trying to negotiate with China for things that he wants. And whether he'll get there, we don't know. Now, this time around, he will have people working for him who live in the real world, who are well informed, and may well be able to negotiate better trade deals. But in no manner, way, shape, or form are tariffs going to reduce prices for Americans. They're going to raise them.
What do you think the kind of agreements he will go through in this upcoming stage? For instance, inflation or the demand, the inflation rates, the agreements, the world alliances, economic alliances. What do you think his policy would be?
Well, Donald wants to negotiate with other countries one-on-one. He doesn't want to pay attention to alliances. That's a central part of how he sees the world. But what he announced in his inaugural address today is all inherently inflationary, not anti-inflationary. He literally promised to bring down prices. That's a benchmark he's going to be held to, and I don't think you'll see prices come down. He may be able to reduce inflation to an even lower level than the low level it's been at for the last 2.5 years, but that will depend, and tariffs will absolutely work against that. So will rounding up people who work in farms and slaughterhouses who are in the U.S. illegally. They're here illegally and they can be removed, but if you do that, farmers are not going to be able to tend and harvest their crops fully, and meat prices will go up. So many of the things Donald is proposing, anyone who understands economics, and I studied that at the doctoral level at the University of Chicago, knows his policies will be inflationary.
Remains to be seen, of course. But here, if I may ask here, Trump's demand for loyalty as a leadership trait. Yeah. Now, with Republicans controlling both houses of Congress, do you see this dynamic enabling his legislative goals, or could it lead to challenges within his own party?
Well, Donald has always promoted the idea that your duty is to be loyal to him, not to the government and the Constitution of the United States. In the Senate, he will do fine with that policy, but the House, Republicans only have a 2-vote majority, and many of them who are further to the right than Donald Trump oppose some of his policies. So he probably cannot get major legislation passed without help from the Democrats. And if the Democrats say, we're not going to help you with your problems, then he's going to be in something of a pickle.
As I said previously, that the Federal Reserve has played a critical role in managing inflation through interest rates hikes. And from your point of view, how will Trump deal, or the Trump's administration work with or challenge the Fed's policies during this term, do you think?
Well, that's a very good question. Donald has been very critical of Jerome Powell, who is the chief banker at the U.S. Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, but he doesn't have the power to remove him. So Jerome Powell will stay there for, I think it's 2 more years till his term is out. But you can expect Donald to blame any inflation on the Fed and to say it's the Federal Reserve, it's not me. Because Donald, of course, as he once said, I've never needed to apologize for anything in my life. I've never done a single thing that was wrong, which is an astonishing statement for any human being.